Welcome back to Just Misha Podcast. I am so excited that you're here, and today's episode is gonna be a big one because it's super personal to me. And I know that once I start sharing it, I know so many of you are also going to relate as well. And I can't wait to dive into it. So, first, I just want to say thank you for the love and support that you have given me since launching this podcast. I am really grateful for the amount of people who have reached out to me and who have really enjoyed the first two episodes, which is just touching the surface of what we're actually going to talk about. But today, we are going to dive into anxiety. And this is very big for me because this is something that I have been dealing with for 9 years, going on 10 years. It's been a very, very long time. And I'm actually going to walk you through my journey. I'm going to share with you my experience, and I'm going to share with you what it means to be a person who deals with anxiety. So I'm going to start talking about it right now, okay? So 2014, I was living in Miami, Florida, living my best life. Everything was great. I have been in Miami for about a year, and that was a very big move. I moved away from everything that I knew and loved, and I took a chance, not risk my life. I didn't risk my life in any way, shape, or form, but I just took a chance. I spread my wings. I'm known to be a free spirited, and that is exactly what I did. I just leaped, and it paid off well until somewhere. So I'm just going to preface this by saying, back in 2013, 2014, a lot of people knew me as like a hardcore hippie, which I still have a lot of that rooted in me, but not nearly as much as I did back in the day. I used to smoke a lot of weed. Mainly, I smoked weed. I didn't really drink at the time. I didn't do any. I really was just more into smoking and everything else. I've been known to dabble in the psychedelics and stuff like that. Again, straight up hippie. So, in those ways, and I was very much, the tree hugger, free love, old traditional hippies, not these new day hippies. They're not the same, okay? I just gotta preface that. But, anyways, so I was actually back home visiting family for a little bit back in Ohio, and I was hanging out with one of my very close friends, and we were smoking, and I became extremely paranoid, which had never happened to me before. And I remember my friend asking me, like, are you freaking out? Like, what is wrong with you? Like, this is not you. And I didn't know what was happening to me. I just had all these like strong, intense feelings in my chest. And I'm like, what is happening to me? I have no idea. All I know is I was freaking scared out of my mind. And I just had like this tingling feeling within my chest. It was like constricting in ways, like I almost couldn't breathe. And that was the very first time that I had actually experienced anxiety. I didn't even know what the word anxiety was. So I remember I got home, I was staying with my mom for like a couple weeks or whatever until I went back to Miami, and I told her, I was like, yeah, I was having this really like crazy feeling. Like I felt like I remember watching like The Little Mermaid. It was on ABC Family, which I guess now is Freeform, but it's always going to be ABC Family to me. And I remember like watching The Little Mermaid was on, and I was watching The Little Mermaid, and because it just made me feel like that little kid, so it made me feel innocent. And I was like, you know what? All right, I felt a little bit better enough to fall asleep. And I remember the next morning getting up, and I was doing like yoga poses and stuff like that. And I was just, trying to get myself to feel better, and I didn't know what. So that happened for like a day or two. And fast forward a couple weeks, I was back in Miami, living my life, doing the thing. And I was having a beach day. Another thing about me, I'm a huge beach bum. I love the beach. And so I was heading to the beach, and this is really where the story kind of like takes place here. So I'm heading to the beach, and I remember just feeling some crazy feelings back in my chest again. I'm like, why am I feeling super overwhelmed? Like I just felt super overwhelmed. I felt like my heart was gonna pound out of my chest, and I didn't know why I was feeling this way. And so I remember like the beach where I lived was like maybe 20, 25 minutes away. I remember I was maybe like 5 minutes, if that, away from the beach. And I remember pulling my car over really fastly, jumping out, and getting my feet on the earth because I felt like I had to ground myself because I didn't understand. Like, I remember having like weird thoughts. Like, they weren't my thoughts, they were just like very weird, like I was really freaked out, scary thoughts. And I can't tell you what the thoughts were. I just kind of remember the feeling of these thoughts. They were just so abnormal for me. Like, it didn't make sense for me to be so scared. I'm heading to the beach. Like, there's no reason for me to be scared because I'm literally going to my favorite place on planet Earth, and I'm over here freaking out. And I'm like, why am I so scared right now? And I remember literally I was like, there's this little bridge, and once you get over the bridge, you're at the beach. And right before the bridge, I had pulled over, got myself in the girth, or put my feet in the grass. I think I actually like peed. I'm also like, I already told you I'm a hippie, so I peed out in nature. And I mean, I'm probably out in the open, but I was freaking out because in my mind, my chest was pounding so fast, and I was like, so it's just overwhelming. So obviously that was like a panic attack. I call my mom. I'm like, Mom, I think I'm having a heart attack. I think like something's not right. I'm like freaking out. Like, I can't breathe. And I would have been 21 around this time. And I'm like really freaking out. And she was like, okay, you just need to breathe. And granted, my mom is a nurse. So I call her about absolutely anything health related. I'm calling my mom. Actually, I'm sorry. My mom is a nurse practitioner now, but at the time she was an ER nurse. So I called her and I'm like freaking out. I'm like, what is happening to me? I'm so scared. Like, why? Like, I'm pretty sure I'm having a heart attack because I just remember like just really, really fast breathing. And I just felt like my heart was coming out of my chest. And, I remember, feeling like that. And she was like, just calm down. It seems like you're having an anxiety attack. And again, I'm like, what is this word anxiety? I have no clue what this word means. I never even heard of the word anxiety. I heard of depression, but I wasn't clearly depressed. I was definitely going through something. And so anyways, my mom calmed me down enough to where I could like go to the beach and just chill out. And I actually remember when I went to the beach, I think that was the first time ever that I truly meditated. When you try to meditate, but like your mind just wanders 1,000 miles an hour and you're like, this isn't meditation because like it's just not meditation. Your mind is still like running. This was the first time ever. I remember laying on the beach and I just completely disappeared. Like I just like became one with all things around me. Like which was so it was so like serenity. It was a feeling of serenity. It was peace. It was harmony. I felt this complete like calmness within myself, and I just felt so peaceful. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, that felt really good. And I remember how I was at the beach. I had a really great day at the beach. And then it was time to go home. And this is where I don't know what happened to the peace, love, and happiness that I was experiencing. It went completely out the window. So I had that moment of pure meditation, pure bliss. And I don't think I've ever felt that like oneness since ever. I don't think I've ever, maybe I have, I don't know. But I just remember it so clearly. When you get those core memories that you're just never going to forget, this was that. And I remember getting in the car. Again, granted, I don't know if you caught this. It takes me 25 minutes to get to the beach. It took me an hour and a half to get home because I had a panic attack, an anxiety attack, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. I had one every 5 minutes. I would drive and then I would have to get out of the car because something about the car, I think it's a little bit of I was claustrophobic, and I never thought of myself as someone who was claustrophobic. I ride all the rides, I get on the water slides, I don't have problems with elevators. I never was that person who was scared of things. If anything, I was a very invincible person. You couldn't tell me anything. I was always doing reckless and dangerous things as in my youth. Like I really was. I was very much a wild child. And I just kept getting out of the car. And it's just a lot, like it's just been a part of my journey for so long. But I remember just constantly getting out of the car, having to put my feet on the ground, having to just breathe and breathe and breathe just enough so I could get home. And it took me an hour and a half of that constant attack after attack after attack to get home. It took me forever. And I remember when I got home, and I remember calling my best friend at the time. And granted, we're not best friends anymore, but I remember calling her and I'm like, um, I'm not gonna say her name, but like I remember telling her, I was like, I don't know what's wrong with me. This has never happened to me, but I feel like I'm losing my mind. And her words to me were, maybe you're going crazy, which is the last thing that you want anyone to tell you. The last thing you ever want to hear is someone tell you you're going crazy when you feel crazy, you know? And I just was like that's the last thing I wanted to hear. And I mean, I kept having panic attack after panic attack, so much so that I actually could no longer keep a job, because every time I would get in the car, I would have an anxiety attack. I would go in the grocery store, I would have an anxiety attack, and I was just over and over having these constant anxiety attacks. And people always ask me, well, what does an anxiety attack feel like? And imagine like a huge sense of overwhelming coming over you, where you can't, like, it's cluster, it's like constricting your throat. You can't breathe. You're barely to get able to words. So much so my hands used to go numb, my mouth would go numb. I remember one time, like I said, one time I was like going to the hospital because I was convinced. Okay, I was convinced that I was having a heart attack. I can't even tell you the amount of times I've actually gone to the emergency room because I thought I was having a heart attack. I often I would be going to sleep and I would just feel that constant like heart palpitation, and I would just feel like I couldn't breathe, like I would, like it was just so constricting, and I would just have to go to I would have to go to the emergency room so they could at least rule out that I'm not having a heart attack. And I remember the very first time I went to the emergency room, I'm driving as fast as I can. I'm trying to get there. I remember I finally got my car parked. My entire body tensed up to where I was like constricted. And I know like you guys that are listening, you can't physically see me, but I was so constricted. Like my entire muscles, everything within me was so tight. My mouth was completely numb. My hands were numb. I was like a hermit crab. Like I was just like, and I remember just kind of like fumbling onto the like sidewalk, and I'm like just sitting there, and I'm sure if someone passed me, they were 100% convinced that I probably was on drugs. I was not. At this point, I couldn't drink, I couldn't smoke weed, I couldn't freaking drink coffee. Anything that was taking any type of control from me, I could no longer do, because I had to be in complete control all the time. And then I finally got the diagnosis. You have generalized anxiety disorder, which, if I'm going to be 100% transparent here, I have every type of anxiety there possibly is. Social anxiety, generalized anxiety, all the different like phobias. I really generally do. I'm a hypochondriac. I have, I'm definitely like I get super paranoid. So many things. Like there's a lot, okay? And I remember I was just like, when I finally got that, I was like, are you sure? And they gave me a little bit of medication, and it helped like kind of hit, like, take the edge off a little bit. It was honestly like, I think allergy medication. And I was like, okay. So it got to the point where it was so bad where I couldn't be in a car any longer, that I actually had to quit my job. I had to move out of Florida, and I had to move out of state. I went and lived with my uncle in Tennessee for a little while. That's a whole nother story, which I will go down another day, not today. And I was there. I had gotten to the point where I wasn't necessarily having anxiety attacks. Stay there for a little bit, got back to Ohio, and I was still having extreme anxiety, and still going to the hospital here and there, making sure I wasn't having heart attacks. Actually, it got so bad that at one point I actually convinced myself. I laugh about it now. It wasn't funny then, but I laugh about it now. My anxiety was so bad at one point that I convinced myself that I actually had cancer. There was a show, gosh dang it, what was that show called? It was on ABC Family 2. It was about a girl who had cancer and all this stuff like that. What was that show called? Gosh dang it, it's gonna drive. She's going to drive me nuts. And as soon as I'm done with this podcast, I'll figure it out and you won't know what I'm talking about. But anyways, there was a show about this girl who had anxiety on ABC Family. And I remember watching the show and I had convinced myself that I had anxiety, or not anxiety, I had cancer. And okay, let me like just kind of backstory this. So my papo, who I was extremely close to, my favorite human being, um, he had died of cancer when I was like 11 years old, and I was convinced that cancer would jump my mom and she would never have cancer, but then I would have cancer. And like, I've never told anybody that. Maybe my husband, I don't know. I don't think that I have even told him, but I was convinced that cancer like doesn't hit the next family member, it hits the following family member. So I was convinced that my mom was going to be okay, but that I was for sure going to get cancer. And so then, like, that's how I've always thought since I was like the age of 11, that I was going to be the one who was going to get cancer. So I had really convinced myself that I had cancer. And I even played it out in my head, like how I was going to tell my loved ones, like how this was all going to work out. And it was just like this wild phenomena that I just bought into and believed. But that's how anxiety works. Anxiety is like thinking of every worst case scenario that's ever possibly happened, and that is like facts, that is truth, that is all that you know. Okay, that is anxiety. Like, and to a T, it can come in very physical forms, it can come in very mental, emotional forms, it can come in every way you think. And because I've dealt with this for like 9.5 years at this point, or 9 years at this point, I have experienced anxiety in all of its ways, and even to this day, it comes in very weird ways. Um, I have not had an anxiety attack since, not like how I had it at the beginning. I haven't had an anxiety attack since 2014. But I still very much deal with anxiety in many, many ways. And some of those ways are very unique. I'm trying to think of how it plays out. Like I try to explain this to people, and it's really hard to explain anxiety if you've never dealt with anxiety. People can get moments of overwhelm, and that's not really the same as anxiety. Anxiety is I always try to explain it to people. There was a Misha before anxiety, and there's 100% a different Misha after anxiety, and we are no longer the same. Like, we operate completely differently. I've already thought of everything that could go wrong very quickly. Like, I am extremely paranoid of planes. I didn't used to be paranoid about planes, but I'm 100% paranoid about planes now. I haven't been on a plane since since the year my daughter was born. So I haven't been on a plane since 2019. So I haven't been on a plane in 4 years. Have zero intentions of going on a plane anytime soon. If I were to go on a plane, I would 100% be having a couple drinks, because that's the only way you're getting me on a plane. So I have like an unnatural fear of flying at this point, and I've flown my entire life, so it's not like I've just newly like flown ever. No, I've always have flown since I was a child, but yet now I have a very not normal fear of like flying. And that's just something like that that's probably not going away anytime soon. If I'm being real, it's not going away anytime soon. Let's see what else. So like nowadays, my anxiety comes out in very different ways. So while I might not have anxiety attacks anymore, and I also want to like just kind of, before I kind of go into where I am now with anxiety, I also kind of want to talk about, like, did I take medication? What did that whole process look like with me and anxiety? Because I do feel that's very important to talk about. After like the little bit of time period that I was like on the like allergy medicine for my anxiety, I actually was back in Ohio and went to an actual doctor for my anxiety, and he prescribed me a medication. So here's where one of my other new paranoias came out. I was 100% petrified of anything pill related. So I remember my doctor prescribed me a medication for anxiety, and I went and I straight up looked at the label, and I'm like, no, I will not take this. This has potential of seizures, and I cannot take that chance with my life, okay? And so I became like so like paranoid there's another word I'm looking for. Phobia. Okay, I have phobias. That's what the word it is. I have a couple phobias. Um, Planes is one, Big Pharma is the other. Which I guess Big Pharma is not a bad one considering I'm obsessed with natural health, so it works out. But I think it also probably, you know, makes that a little bit stronger because I have a phobia with Big Pharma. So, anyways, like I said, I was looking at this medication. I was like, oh no, 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 I cannot take any of this. This is absolutely negative, Ghost Rider. We are not taking this medication. So I straight up threw the medication away and I was like, I am going to figure this out my own way, okay? And at that point, like I said, I cut out smoking, I cut out alcohol, I cut out coffee. I could not take any type of caffeine. I remember one time I was working at Starbucks and I had a matcha latte, which, by the way, matcha has way smaller percentage of caffeine than like an espresso or a latte or coffee or whatever. I was losing my freaking crap within inside of myself when I had a matcha latte one time. I was like, I was freaking out. I was like, oh my god! Like I was being like, I don't know. It was almost like you can think of like a crazy person worried about like the FBI coming for you or something. That is how I operated. I was like, oh my god! I was freaking out during my entire shift. You would have thought basically I was on like weed and having a very bad high, but that was not what the case was. I was just going through it with my anxiety and yeah, so anyways, I basically cut out anything that alters your state of mind. And I was like, nope, can't do it. I focus on health. I exercise like crazy. I was doing insanity workouts. I was walking like 5 miles a day. So I would typically do like two types of workouts every single day. I focused on what I ate. And like I said, I did nothing. It was probably a good year and a half before I even had alcohol again. It was a while. So it was yeah. So I just didn't do any of that stuff. Now I can drink. I still can't really smoke weed. Like I no, I don't. I don't do it at all. For the most part. Not that I'm against it. It's just I don't know. Like I'm used to like if I have a drink of like I know my limitations with alcohol. Weed is kind of harder to figure out because you never know how strong a weed can be. So and I also because I am paranoid of something being laced or anything like that. I could never smoke weed from the streets. I could never like I just couldn't. Like I remember when I was living in Miami, I did get back into smoking. Let me preface. Okay, I definitely was smoking weed again after anxiety for a while, but then I completely cut it out in the last like 5 years, and I haven't done it since, really. Um, because I refuse to smoke anything off the streets. I don't trust it. You ain't lacing my stuff with no fentanyl. You ain't getting me hooked on anything or having me overdose on anything. So again, if I can completely control the situation, I'm not doing it. Which brings me to my next point. So yeah, I 100%. So nowadays, how anxiety looks for me is this need to control, this need to be empower and know like I can control all the everything that's going to work out. I need it to go a certain way. I just get freaked out by things. Like if we don't do it this way, then this could happen, and I just get like just paranoid of things. Obviously, I have a child who is 4 years old, so she 100% sends my anxiety through the roof because with her, like, the kid has only gone to the pool like twice. I'm paranoid of the pool. I'm like, no, I don't want to do the pool. So it comes out in very, very different ways now. It's not so much of, I can't leave my house because I'm going to have an anxiety attack. I mean, I can be in my car. I don't like my husband driving, I'll tell you that. And you can ask him. I'm constantly like, why are you braking so hard? Why'd you slam my door? Like I definitely again try to control all the situations I possibly can, which now I'm really, really trying to practice just like letting go and backing off. But I'm like, when it comes to Livy, my daughter, I am always thinking of anything and everything that could possibly happen and like prepare and then like prevent. Basically, that's how I operate at this point in time. Now, something that didn't used to bother me but does kind of bother me now, I get very triggered by noises. Like if there's a lot of chaos going on, if there's a lot of screaming and hollering, like, I mean, I have a mini zoo and then I have a toddler and then I have a husband. And, if there's too many noises like happening in my house, I get very, very overwhelmed by a lot of noises to where like that actually like I want to cover my ears and like I feel like suffocated by it and I want to go hide in a corner. So that is actually probably the biggest way I notice anxiety showing up in my life now is I just get super overwhelmed by a lot of noise. Like if I like let's say my phone was on, my daughter's like playing and screaming, like my husband's trying to talk to me, my dogs are going crazy, my cats are playing, like I am freaking out because it's chaotic to me. My whole system is like overloaded and I just need to like abort mission. So I definitely, have to. Those are the things that I have to look out for if I feel I'm getting overstimulated. So I spend a lot of time in nature. I love going on long walks. I love nature hikes. So that is one of those big things that I do nowadays is I do a lot of nature hikes. Um, but I'm always constantly, I don't want it to seem like I'm just like complaining and showing you all these ways that anxiety shows up. But this is what I deal with. um, I don't do medication, obviously. Like I said, I'm paranoid of it. I have a phobia with it, so that's never gonna work. Let me actually tell you, see, there's so much I can tell you about my journey with anxiety. Again, I have a whole 9 years list of it, but I'm just trying to give you like kind of the highlight reels of it. But last year, actually, I was going through 18 days. I don't want to call them panic attacks because panic attacks is what I had back in 2014, and that was extremely intense for me. That was extremely heavy, and that's not how I felt. I just felt very intense feelings of overwhelm, but not so much so that I couldn't function and operate, but I would just be really freaked out basically every day, all day long. It was very wavy. Like I was constantly going through these waves of anxiety all the time. And last year, back in July, for 18 days straight, that's what happened. So much so that I went to the doctor because I'm like, look, yes, I have anxiety. I haven't dealt with this. I don't know why. Nothing's going on in my life. I don't know why this is happening. And help me, basically. Like, I was like, for me to go to the doctor and ask them for help, that's a big, clear sign. Like, okay, I'm clearly overwhelmed and I need something. They prescribed me 2 different medications to see how it would work for me. The first one made me freaking aggressive as crap. And I was like, nope, we ain't doing that. I don't need that. I already have anger. I don't need like something to intensify it. So I was like, nope, we're not doing anger. Shut it down, not doing that. And then they gave me another medication, which was okay, but it was weird. I don't like feeling, I much rather feel like myself. I know how to deal with me. I don't know how to deal with something that is manipulating me. And because I already have like this fear of medication, the moment I put a medication into my body, I'm already like hyper aware of any sensation, any feeling that happens in my body. I'm already like freaking out in some way, shape, or form. So I was like, this doesn't really make me comfortable. And I had to like cut that out. But it was funny because like after that, the whole 18 days of like overwhelm stopped and I went back to being normal. So it was kind of weird. But that happened. But I over the whole 9.5 years, no, medication wasn't the way that I dealt with it. I really did use like exercise and food as a way of dealing with my anxiety, and that really did work out well, to so much so that I haven't had an anxiety attack, panic attack in almost 9 years since when I was first diagnosed with anxiety. Yes, anxiety still shows up in different ways, but you want to know something, and this is me kind of like wrapping up a little bit. Um, when I think back at anxiety, I used to be so mad. I used to want to completely get rid of it. I didn't want to deal with it anymore. I felt like I was weak because of it. And you know what? I think it's the complete opposite. Having anxiety was the catalyst in my life. It completely shifted me. If I didn't get anxiety, I wouldn't have shifted my life in the ways that I did, because the moment I had it, I was on a mission of like healing myself, finding ways to make myself feel better. I learned so much. Like, if it wasn't for anxiety, there's no way I would have learned as much about health as I do now, or food and exercise and all these different things. I wouldn't even know half of what I know now if it wasn't because of being like having anxiety. And two, you know, I used to think that anxiety made me weak. I think I already said this, make me weak of a person. It doesn't. It absolutely does not make you weak if you have anxiety. If anything, you are a stronger person, because you deal with fear every day, all day, and you still choose to show up with strength and courage, bravery. That is a big deal. So, before I used to hate on myself because I'm like, oh, you deal with this, and oh, you're like you're weak because of it. No. No, I am not. I am not weak because I have anxiety. If anything, it's the complete opposite, because even with it, I still choose to show up. I still choose to find the positivity in every single day. I still try to be the best person I can be. I try to be the best friend I can be, wife I can be, mother I can be, friend, I think I already said friend, but child, daughter, whatever. I still try to be the best version of me. I still come on this podcast and I want to help people. I still want to share with people. I don't feel weak. Yes, I am constantly in a state of fear often, but that doesn't make me weak. If anything, I'm so much braver than people who don't deal with anxiety, because I see the fear and I show up anyways. I show up even though I'm scared. I'm in this podcast studio. Like I said, I deal with social anxiety. This is perfect for me because I love to speak and I love to talk, and I love having conversations with people, and typically I can talk to anyone on the street, but I'm really an outgoing introvert. Like, I need my isolation. I need my alone time. I need to be away from human interaction, because otherwise I get really overwhelmed by them. But, like right now, I'm in the podcast studio, and they were having like this nice little happy hour outside, and I saw them out there, and I could have gone and had a free drink or whatever, and I was like, no, I'm not, because I don't want to have to like talk to anyone and say anything, and I don't want to be this awkward charade that I'm going to play with them, because sometimes I feel like I don't know how to talk to people in ways. But I come into my studio and I just go and I come here and I share it with you. But that's still brave. Like, I'm still extremely vulnerable. I'm sharing with you parts of me that are not necessarily easy to share, and even next week's going to be an even harder podcast to deal with, but I still do it anyways, because I'm choosing to be brave versus letting my fear, my anxiety control the show. And not long ago, I actually had someone say, don't take ownership of it. And I here's the thing, if I don't take ownership of it, it still controls me, but if I do take ownership of it, I actually control it, and it just is a rider in my car, my vehicle. We're driving along, I'm the driver, but anxiety does have a seat in the back. They don't get to be, for the most part, I try not to let them up front, and sometimes they can be a backseat driver, but they're still there, just like fear is there, just like anger is there, just like hurt and pain and all the things. They're all along on the ride. We're basically driving a huge van, and we got all of our baggage with us, and they're still there. But that doesn't mean that we don't keep driving, we don't keep moving forward. We still keep going, even if we're petrified. And that is the point. That is the point. You can have all these things that are going wrong in your life, but you can still keep choosing to move forward. You can still choose to be the best version of you. And that is what I really wanted to share about this podcast. I walked you through the journey of it. It's not been pretty. It's not been easy. It's been a part of me for forever, and I'm sure it's not going anywhere anytime soon. The day it does, I'm gonna be like, whoa, like I wouldn't even know what to do with myself. But I'm used to carrying the baggage along, and we've learned to coexist, and I don't hate on it as much. The only thing that gets tricky for me is you have intuition and you have anxiety as well. Sometimes the only thing that gets hard is trying to decipher between the two, because they can feel very, very similar. I will say oftentimes, which again, we're going to explore more of this in next week's episode, because we're going to really dive into definitely a harder topic that, not everyone's going to want to hear, but I still think it's important to share. And we'll kind of dive more into that intuition side of things. But um, that's the only thing that can get a little messy and kind of blurry, is trying to decipher between intuition and anxiety, because they do feel so similar. Um, but yeah, like I said, we're gonna save that for next week's episode. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to, I'm going to leave it there. You know, if you do deal with anxiety, or if you love someone who deals with anxiety, just try to understand that they're in like kind of a constant state of fear and overwhelm, and they're still choosing to show up. And it's not easy, and it's not, you know, not it's definitely not easy for the person who's helping someone with anxiety, but it's definitely not easy for the person who is dealing with anxiety. And I just encourage you to either give compassion to yourself, give love to yourself, look at yourself not as a victim, because you're not a victim. We don't play victim games here, but as a person who is so much stronger than the normal average day person. And if you love someone who has anxiety, just be more compassionate and understanding, and understand like not everything they have in their control, even if they want to control everything, they're just having a hard time not controlling things because of this constant state of fear that they deal with and overwhelm that they deal with. And if we could come to that place, oh, the magic that would take place. And so, yeah, I'm going to leave it there. I want to give you a preview of next week's episode. Next week's episode is another heavy topic. We're going to actually talk about miscarriages. And anyone who has followed my Instagram or Facebook knows that I have dealt with miscarriages in the last 6 months. But what most people don't know is I actually just went through my third miscarriage a week ago, actually. Still was recording podcasts and everything else. It's kind of wild. But even miscarriages, which is something that is super heavy and not a lot of people want to talk about it because it makes them uncomfortable, I'm actually going to share some beauty that can be found in that. And I hope that you show up for that podcast, because everyone, I can promise you, almost every single person knows someone who has dealt with someone who has had loss, miscarriages, and everything else. And this podcast is going to be for them. And it's going to be for those who want to understand them. So every podcast, for the most part, I'm either going to be sharing something that you can relate to, or know someone who has gone through it and you can better love and support them. So that is going to be next week's podcast. We're going to dive into that. But I want to encourage you. You know, I realize what the mission of my podcast really is, and it's vulnerability. I firmly believe that vulnerability is your superpower. And I want to encourage you to be vulnerable this week. What can you do? Could you say something that's been on your heart that maybe you've been scared to say? Can you start that business and share your ideas, even though you're scared of what other people might think? You're scared of failing. You're scared of not being perfect enough. Or can you go try that new activity that you've been wanting to try, but you're scared? I want to encourage you to go be vulnerable, because I firmly believe that when you can be vulnerable, that is your connection to the world. And the more we're vulnerable, the more we shed light on the things that we're scared of. And then the more that gives other people the ability to feel seen and heard and know that they're not alone. And that is very, very powerful. And so I just encourage you to go be vulnerable. And I will talk to you next week. Like I said, next week we're diving heavy. We're going to keep on going with this whole podcast here. But I will see you guys next Thursday. I'm super thrilled. Thank you so much for being a part of the podcast. And again, if you love this podcast, please leave a review, leave a comment, subscribe, share with your friends, share it with the world. The more people who hear it, the more people that feel seen and heard, and that is the mission here. So thank you very much. I will see you next Thursday.